Games Workshop is celebrating 50 years of existence, and their White Dwarf has been covering the earlier starter sets for the editions. Page 2 mentions a card dreadnought comes with the magazine. Mine didn't, and I don't know if that's a printing error now the magazine apparently has no editor, or if someone stole my card dreadnought I was supposed to get. If a new card dreadnought is real, I want to see pictures in my Discord of what other people got with their White Dwarf magazine. Last year on Warhammer Plus, Games Workshop released a video showing a battle report that took inspiration from the 3rd edition starter set. One of the players was fully reminiscing and also recalled how cool skateboards were in the late 90s.
Look at that guy go.
It wasn't grinding attrition, we were grinding rails. The other player was some sort of child by comparison. 11th edition is not far away, and with the release of a new edition comes a new starter set to introduce players to 40k. I mean, introduce players to Space Marines, as there always have to be Space Marines. There have been 8 starter sets from 1st edition to 10th edition of Warhammer 40,000. The 6th and 7th editions were the same starter set due to a very short 6th edition, and there was no 1st edition launch box for Rogue Trader, not in any way that would be recognised as today being a starter set. There was the famous RTO1 box of Marines with missile launchers and helmets that you would recognise in the Horus Heresy line. 30 Marines for £10. A lot of what came out in 1st edition has been added to Horus Heresy, even though the big Civil War fight in the 1st edition was the Badab War. It was assumed that lots of players would have Space Marines, so a civil war was needed to stop people from bullying the one local Orc player. Not that there was anything wrong with local groups. This was way before the internet was available for online hobby discussion. The online sphere of Warhammer 40,000 didn't really start until late into 3rd edition. So how do we judge a good launch box? What are the best qualities we're looking for? I don't care much about the accessories. They all came with dice and the core rules. Some had quick reference sheets that would be great for the rest of the edition. There were measuring devices, no tape measures, but rulers. The plastic rulers of recent times or the red whippy sticks of pain. How good is the terrain in the box? That is an important aspect. Do you get things to make a battlefield, or do you have to buy that separately? Terrain is so important to playing a war game in any edition. So if you get terrain in the starter set, that is a big bonus. How many models are you getting? 20 models isn't a great start for 2 armies of 40k. Getting loads of most of an army is what people should get. And I don't care about extra models. Like in 10th edition, I don't care about the Teleport Homer. That is no one's favourite model from the starter set. How interesting and unique are the models? A basic pose, but the same pose reversed later on, isn't great, but it's better than 2 of the exact same pose. And then there's the money. I'm factoring in inflation, and we're doing this in UK pounds. You all understand that a bigger number costs more. That is a factor in all real-world currencies, and that's all you need when comparing the edition boxes. And since all of them were released in the UK, that's the easiest way to compare it with that currency. So this is how I rank them, starting with the worst. In the lowest position, 8th position, is the 4th edition starter set, The Battle for Macragge. It came out in 2004. It was £40 at the time, or £70 with inflation, making it the 2nd cheapest. You got a Lieutenant Virus model, Lieutenant Virus the pilot, who never had rules outside of the little scenarios you got in the playbook. He can work as a Sir Hector if you still have the Virus model and you want to make one of your Imperial Knights count as Canis Rex. Or they're good as an Imperial Agent or an Objective Marker or whatever else you want. A Cherub for the Battle Sisters. It was good that this gave you a series of little games to play that were all self-contained. If you didn't want to play bigger 40k, this was a campaign in itself that taught you everything and is essentially an actual game in an actual game box. Movement is explained by navigating spore mines, falling back is explained by retreating from gene stealers, and shooting is explained by having the Marines shoot some Tyranids. 10 tactical Marines are all you get for the Space Marines, and on the Tyranid side are 10 Termagants with flesh borers, 6 gene stealers, and 8 spore mines. There was a great set of terrain, but it was all very low terrain. It's easy to see over, very difficult to balance the models on top of. If you've ever seen a crashed ship on a 40k board, this is the set it came from. It also had force field terrain posts, which did have some rules in future editions as force field barriers. And there's the Tyrannid Sphincter terrain. The 3rd edition starter set in 1998 cost £50, which is £95 after inflation. It is worth it for the box art alone. And you got about the same number of models as in 4th edition. There were 20 Kabalite warriors / Dark Eldar warriors. These are multi-part, multi-pose, which is very cool, much better than the monopose models you otherwise get. And it was great to introduce the Dark Eldar into 40k. They were fighting against 10 Black Templar painted tactical marines, but they could be painted any way you wanted. That is the idea of Space Marines. The blandest marines. There were 7 marines with bolters, 1 with a flamer, 1 with a missile launcher, and a sergeant with a chainsword and bolt pistol. This also had the new and never changed plastic land speeder, and you could fit that with a heavy bolter or a multi-melter. This had a lot of great terrain, but in plastic instead of the 2nd edition card versions. Everyone from this era and beyond will recognize the ruins. This is why terrain is important. It's very much defining the setting of Warhammer 40,000. Each 3rd edition battle force came with different versions, or the trees. The trees and the tank traps have fallen a bit more out of fashion, but these were the 4 corner ruins to collect. In 2017, we had the 8th edition starter set, £95 or £125 with inflation. This is the Dark Imperium just after the fall of Cadia, and it was part of the initial campaign, the Plague Wars taking place in the Macragge sector. This introduced the Primaris Marines, so it had no tactical marines. 0 out of 10. Really, they shouldn't even be in 5th place, it should be last. There were very intricate Death Guard models, perhaps too much detail. I know detail is good, but when you're a new player, that much detail, character levels of detail on basic warriors is a lot to handle. Seeing the poxwalkers and the paint schemes on the box is daunting for a horde of creatures. There's the awesome Lord of Contagion in Terminator armor though. That's a big plus. And a big axe. 8th edition had a big change in the rules compared to previous editions of 40k. The rules were closer to Age of Sigmar, where characters couldn't join units, they just followed them behind. Imagine 40k with characters being able to join units. Well, you can now if you play 10th edition. Otherwise, it was something we had from like 3rd edition through to 7th edition, and then it dropped off. There were lots of new Death Guard characters made up so they could be their own faction. More than a single unit, the Plague Marines on top of the Chaos Space Marine range. Of course, the Cult Marines now all have their own codex, but they really lack a lot of the core parts of the Chaos Space Marine range, and which units can be with each legion feels almost random. Big gun dog thing with lots of guns? Yeah, that fits with the World Eaters faction, the one that's all about close combat. Sure. The 9th edition starter set came out in 2020 for £125, that's £155 when accounting for inflation. This is the Indomitus Crusade, one branch of the Imperium Strike Fleet going to the Pariah Nexus, where we are still fighting the Necrons. It had a great trailer with Battle Sisters, so I was disappointed not to see any sisters in the launch box. Not even a single Battle Sister squad or a one-off Lieutenant Varus type Battle Sister model with a power sword. You got 24 Space Marines, and one of the best looking Chaplain models, even better than the ball-gagged Blood Angel Chaplain. The Assault Intercessors were nice. They were Assault Marines without the jump pack. There already were rules for Assault Marines without jump packs. I have the unit. I used to have them jump out of a Rhino. But they were Assault Marine models with basic Space Marine backpacks. This was a nice unit. There were 36 Necrons, I'm not including the little Plasma Sight token, and this was the start of a Necron range refresh. They were less the Terminator kind of robot, and more crumbling zombies, like we can see mostly in the Necron Warriors, with cables hanging out similar to how intestines would hang out of zombies. The Necron Destroyers appeared, but on foot and combat focused, and there's a cool Canoptek Reanimator creature. Guessing from my audience, most of you will only know this launch box and the Leviathan box. Turnover of fans is more rapid than you think. And in the real-life times of 2020, it was the plague times. Lots of people were willing to get back into 40k to paint and relax while they were stuck at home. I was also at home, but never felt stuck. This was the big revival in Warhammer interest. That is how I know you'll know this starter set and Leviathan. In 2012, and then also in 2014, we have the 6th and 7th starter sets. Let's stick with the 2012 version for argument's sake. £65 or £90 with inflation. This was part of the 13th Black Crusade that had been on hold for about 10 years and wouldn't start moving again for another 5 years. It had a limited edition set version which also came with a Dark Angels chaplain. This was like the whole starter set plus one extra model, whereas with the 9th edition starter set, you could have the starter set broken up into smaller bits where you got even smaller parts of the starter set. But I was just taking it as the full starter set as we got at the start of the edition, rather than any of these models but in smaller discount boxes. The 6th edition / 7th edition starter set was the only one to have Space Marines that were distinctly from one particular chapter. There were sculpted Dark Angel icons and feathers, which is a Dark Angel motif. This is a little bit off-putting for some players as it may not fit with their Blood Angels or Black Templars. You got 20 Space Marines of various types, like Terminators and Bikes, not counting the chaplain. There were a lot more poses for the Space Marines compared to the starter sets that had come before. A lot of plasma weapon wielding Marines as befitting of the Dark Angels. And the Chaos side had 20 cultists, a Hellbrute, 6 actual chosen models for the first time, and a Chaos Lord. These introduced the first proper Chaos cultist models, something I had wanted for many years, and they were led by a traitor commissar with a tragic backstory. There were fewer repeated cultist poses in this starter set than there are in the current knife-only Chaos Cultist box. That is just a disappointing trail. Models are meant to get better over time, not worse. I ranked this starter set highly, and probably higher than other people, because it was the first time the starter set had 2 factions I collected, assuming you could count the Dark Angels as Space Marines, which you should. And even if their Legion was not loyal to the end, the chapter currently is. 2023 was the 10th edition Leviathan starter set. £150 is very pricey. You know it is very expensive. There were 25 Marines, not including a teleport homer marker, and 45 Tyranids, not including the Neuroloids. And there was no terrain, but a vast number of models. The Infernus Marines were new, but all of the others on the Space Marine side already existed. There was an Apothecary, but in slightly different armor, that can't join any of the units you get in the box. Kind of awkward for a starter set. And I think there are enough Space Marine Lieutenants. 8th edition came with 2 in the starter set. The Tyranids I especially like. These are impressive monsters that took great leads from the 2nd edition style. The Zoanthrope converted into the Neuro Tyrant, the Screamer Killer with an update for today, and the Psychophage looks really gnarly. These are good centerpiece units. In 2nd place is the 5th edition starter set from 2008. £40 or £65 with inflation, the cheapest one once you consider inflation. And you got so many models for £40. And for the context, £40 is 5 Seraphim in 2025 money. Assault on Black Reach gave you 10 tactical Marines, one with a flamer, one with a missile launcher, and a pointing sergeant carrying a chainsword, a captain, 5 Terminators, a dreadnought, a war boss, very cool model with a giant power claw, 5 knobs in plastic for the first time, not mega knobs, just regular knobs, 20 Orc Boys, and 3 Death Copters. This and second-hand markets of this model were the only place you could get Death Copters for many, many years. In 9th edition, they were eventually released as their own box. This set has a lot of identically posed models, but that's fine for Orc Boys. And there's no terrain for the first time, which really was a big negative. 2nd, 3rd, and 4th edition get major props for having terrain. But this is a big improvement in the number of models from 4th edition, but it's not the box set that had the most. In first place is the 1993 2nd edition starter set. It was £35 or £75 once we consider inflation. That is amazing value. This was themed around the wars for Armageddon. There were a lot of repeated models, but loads of models. More than in the 10th edition starter set, and at a quarter of the price, or half the price with inflation. 20 tactical Marines. Oh yeah, there was a flamer, and a missile launcher, and a sergeant with a chainsword. 20 Orc Boys, 40 Gretchen, You may know them as grots, otherwise you could be confused about a 40k box that had 40 German women carrying steins. But that's just my perception of Gretchen. I would also accept tall with big glasses and a blue dress. All the Gretchen were the same pose, so you differentiated the unit by painting the guns or the coats a different colour. The Bolter Marines were all the same, with 14 of them. The 2 missile launchers were the same, the 2 flamers were the same, and the 2 sergeants with bolt pistol and chainsword and back banner are the same. There's no characters in these boxes, which was standard at the time and would be until 5th edition. Battle Force boxes that you could get were also not a full army in a book, but were most of an army except for characters, and in 2nd edition up to half of your army could be characters. But characters were £4 a model in metal, not the £25 for one plastic model they are now. But this is a full complement of orcs, as long as you like Gretchen, and who doesn't like Gretchen? There really needs to be a specific Gretchen detachment for the orcs in 10th edition. But at the time, Gretchen were more powerful than they are now, and were more equal in power and armor to a guardsman. The orc boys had shooting on the level of a guardsman, but they were firing bolt pistols and bolters. I would say that the guardsmen of 2nd edition were lacking, but that can't be right. The Praetorian Guard were awesome. Do remember that they were metal. Most of 40k was. Even in 3rd edition, anything outside of the basic infantry and the rhino was metal. The Razorback and the Immolator were a pain because it was metal on plastic. The same problem the Exorcist had. So lots of plastic models for this price is wonderful. And it doesn't matter so much about the monopose aspect. Certainly not for this time period. And it was easy for new players to paint and get better with each model as they go. Quick to paint, much quicker than something like the 8th edition Death Guard. And there's loads of terrain. Chest-high walls, people-blocking terrain, 2-part terrain with a higher level, perfect for being able to play out of the box without anything else. No need to find a toaster and 6 cups to block line of sight on the table like you would need for later edition launch boxes. Maybe this best set still only gets an 8 out of 10, but it came with an Orc card Dreadnought, which is way easier to build than the Metal Orc Dreadnought of the time. 11 out of 10 for this set. Which one is your favourite? And with 11th edition coming, I bet it has Space Marines, probably around 20 Space Marines. Let's see what else could be coming for 11th edition. My darlings and viewers, have a great day of 40k.